At my wedding reception, I was adjusting my veil using the reflection in a copper backsplash I had spent 3 months restoring by hand. The metal was polished to a mirror shine, and that is the only reason I saw her. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, stood directly behind me. She didn't notice my eyes in the copper. She only saw my champagne resting on the bar. I watched as she slipped a small glass vial from her clutch and dropped 3 clear drops into my drink. I didn't turn around. I didn't scream. I waited until she walked away to greet a senator's wife. Then, with the calm precision of a surgeon, I reached out and switched our glasses. Her poison was now in her hand, and the real wedding drama was about to begin. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Most brides would be hyperventilating in the bathroom after seeing their new mother-in-law try to drug them. But I'm a restoration architect. I make a living dealing with crumbling foundations and structural failures. Panic is a luxury I can't afford. What I felt in that moment wasn't fear. It was static load, the engineering term for the immense silent weight a beam carries just before it either holds the roof or snaps in two. I walked back to the head table, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the hardwood floor. I checked my pulse. 80 beats per minute, elevated but controlled. I smoothed the silk of my dress and sat beside Ethan, the man who saves children's lives as a pediatric surgeon but couldn't see that his own mother was a pathogen. He squeezed my hand under the table, his thumb brushing my ring. He looked at me with so much love it almost hurt. He whispered that I looked beautiful. He had no idea that 10 feet away, his mother was sipping champagne meant to be my destruction. I looked across the table. Eleanor was seated, holding court with my parents, laughing at something my father said, playing the role of benevolent matriarch flawlessly. She met my eyes. Hers were cold, lifeless things buried beneath layers of expensive mascara. She raised her glass, my glass, in a silent toast. A small smirk said, "Checkmate, darling." She thought she had designed this moment. She believed I was just a lucky girl who wandered into her dynasty, a problem solvable with money or chemicals. I picked up my water glass. My hand didn't shake. I took a slow sip. The water was cold. It tasted like clarity. I watched Eleanor take another confident drink of champagne. She had spent 2 years trying to bulldoze me, treating me like a squatter in her son's life. She called my work dirty. She offered me 6 figures to disappear. What she forgot was this. Restoration architects know exactly where the weak points are, and we know when a structure is about to collapse. I set my glass down, smiled at her, and waited. To understand why I didn't stop her, why I didn't grab her wrist and call the police, you need to understand the architecture of our war. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was the demolition phase of a project Eleanor had been managing for 2 years. From the moment Ethan introduced us, I was a zoning violation in her perfectly curated world. The Sterlings are what people call old money, which usually means dusty wealth and a deep fear of anyone who actually works for a living. I met Eleanor during an estate inspection. I wore work boots and a hard hat dusted with drywall. She looked at my hands like they were contagious. She asked Ethan, right in front of me, if he was hiring help for renovations. When he said I was his girlfriend, she didn't smile. She just said, "Oh." The insults were never loud. They were structural. Tiny cracks meant to make me collapse. She forgot to invite me to family dinners. She introduced me as Ethan's little project manager, ignoring my master's degree and professional license. The real failure came 6 months ago. I sat in her library as she slid a creamy envelope across a mahogany desk. Inside was a cashier's check for $100,000. She called it a severance package. "You're a lovely girl, Olivia," she said, "but be realistic. You're new money, you build things, we own things. You'll never belong at this table, and I'm saving you the embarrassment." I looked at the check. It was more than my parents earned in 2 years. I didn't rip it up or throw it at her. I slid it back and said, "You're underestimating the cost of labor, Eleanor. I'm not for sale." That was when her eyes changed. I stopped being a nuisance and became a threat, and threats must be neutralized. In psychology, there's a concept called an extinction burst. When a behavior stops working, it escalates before it dies. The week before the wedding was Eleanor's extinction burst. On Tuesday, she called our florist and claimed I died in a car accident. Thankfully, the florist called me. On Thursday, I found her inspecting my veil. After she left, there was a jagged tear through the lace. She claimed it caught on her ring, but I know the tensile strength of French lace. You have to want to rip it. I repaired it with gold thread, a restoration technique. I didn't tell Ethan. I knew she'd gaslight him, call me paranoid, say I was imagining things. She relied on her behavior sounding too insane to believe. So when I saw the vial at the reception, everything made sense. This was the final detonation. She couldn't stop the wedding, so she planned to ruin the memory. She wanted me sick, humiliated, exposed. She wanted a disaster. I simply chose to let her be the one caught in it. Structural failure is rarely instant. Buildings groan, rivets pop, wood splinters. You just have to be quiet enough to listen. The hall erupted in applause as Ethan finished his speech. He kissed my cheek and whispered that he was the luckiest man alive. Then the room went silent. A spoon tapped against crystal like a warning bell. Eleanor stood. Regal in silver, she raised the gold-rimmed champagne flute she had poisoned. The room waited. She smiled, then turned to me with a predator's gaze. "Marriage," she began, her voice polished by finishing school, "is about partnership. It's about knowing who you are and where you come from." A few friends chuckled. "And most importantly, it's about trust. Knowing the person beside you has your best interests at heart." She looked me straight in the eyes on the word trust. I didn't blink. I lifted my water glass. Eleanor lifted the poisoned chalice. "To the happy couple," she said, tilting the glass back. I watched the golden liquid vanish. I watched her swallow. 1 gulp. 2. She drained it. For a moment, nothing happened. She sat down, looking triumphant. She turned to my father and began chatting about his golf handicap. 1 minute passed, then 2. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, counting the seconds like a metronome. At 2 minutes and 40 seconds, the groaning started. Eleanor stopped mid-sentence. She blinked rapidly, her hand flying to her throat. Her face, usually hidden beneath layers of foundation and control, turned a sickly gray. She tried to stand, maybe to excuse herself to the restroom, but gravity had other ideas. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the tablecloth for balance, dragging a centerpiece of expensive lilies down with her. Then the emetic did exactly what chemistry said it would do. This wasn't a graceful feint. It was violent. Eleanor made a guttural, awful sound that silenced the string quartet. She vomited onto the head table over the silk runner, the china, and the skirt of her custom gown. The smell hit instantly. The woman who had spent 60 years cultivating untouchable perfection was now heaving on the floor in front of 200 members of the city's elite. "Mom!" Ethan shouted, leaping to his feet. "Mom!" She looked up at him, eyes wide and unfocused, gasping for air. "I don't," she slurred. "I don't feel—" She collapsed sideways into the mess she had created. The room exploded into chaos, but I stayed seated 1 second longer, watching the ruin. It was ugly. It was tragic. And it was exactly what she had planned for me. In a crisis, most people panic. As guests screamed and crowded in, I stood and took control. I told the DJ to cut the music. I directed the coordinator to clear a path for paramedics. Ethan was on the floor checking her vitals, his surgeon instincts fully engaged, calling out pulse, airway, pupils. The paramedics arrived within 4 minutes. They lifted Eleanor onto a stretcher. She was barely conscious, mumbling incoherently. As they moved her, her beaded clutch slid from her lap and hit the floor. The clasp snapped open. Its contents spilled across the hardwood. Lipstick, a compact mirror, and a small empty glass vial. Ethan saw it. He froze. But that wasn't the real evidence. Beside the vial lay a folded piece of heavy cream stationery. I knew what it was before I opened it. Eleanor's handwriting, elegant, looping script. I picked it up and walked to Ethan. He was staring at the vial, his face drained of color. "Ethan," I said quietly, cutting through the noise, "read this." He looked confused, then unfolded the paper. I watched his eyes move across the words. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must apologize for the interruption. My new daughter-in-law has struggled for years with personal demons. We hoped the stress of the wedding wouldn't trigger a relapse, but it seems the alcohol was too much. Please forgive the mess. We will get her the help she needs." It was a speech, written before the reception. She hadn't planned just to make me sick. She had planned the story of my destruction. She intended to frame my poisoning as a drunken, bulimic breakdown and destroy my reputation while I vomited. I watched the change cross Ethan's face. It's rare to see a man become an orphan while his mother is still alive. The fear vanished. The concern vanished. His eyes went cold. He finally saw the architecture of the trap. He realized the monster wasn't under the bed. She was the one who had tucked him in. He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. He didn't look at me. He looked at the paramedic. "She didn't have a stroke," Ethan said, his voice like grinding metal. "She ingested an emetic and a sedative. Check her bag and call the police." The hospital smelled like antiseptic and regret. Eleanor was stabilized in a private room. The drugs were flushed from her system, but the legal fallout was just beginning. Police waited in the hallway. Officer Cardona, a man who looked like he'd seen enough family disasters for 10 lifetimes, took my statement. I didn't need emotion. I needed efficiency. I pulled up a file on my phone. While paramedics loaded Eleanor, I had texted the venue manager. Because I restored the Sterling estate, I knew exactly where the blind spots were and where the 4K camera behind the bar wasn't. I had the footage before the ambulance reached the hospital. Timestamp 2:47 p.m. Eleanor glances around. She pulls the vial. She drops the poison. Undeniable proof of a felony. Ethan emerged from Eleanor's room looking 10 years older. He walked past me, past his father sitting with his head in his hands, and went straight to the officer. "My mother is awake," Ethan said flatly. "She wants to make a statement." "Did she confess?" the officer asked. Ethan let out a dry, humorless laugh. "No. She said she did it to save me. She said Olivia is a gold digger destroying the Sterling bloodline. She said I'd thank her someday." This was the moment. The cord would either snap or tighten forever. Eleanor played her final card. Mother knows best. 30 years of guilt was supposed to save her. Ethan reached into his pocket and handed over the cream-colored note. "Evidence of premeditation," he said. "She didn't just assault my wife, she planned a character assassination." "Ethan, don't," his father whispered. "She's your mother." "No," Ethan replied. "She's a criminal. And if you pay for her lawyer, you're an accomplice." He turned back to the officer. "I'm pressing charges and requesting a restraining order for my wife and myself." I watched him sign the statement. It was the most romantic thing I'd ever seen. He didn't just choose me. He amputated what was killing us. Clean, precise, final. It's been 12 months since the wedding. Eleanor is serving a 24-month sentence for aggravated assault and reckless endangerment. Her lawyer tried diminished capacity, but the pre-written speech destroyed that defense. You can't claim insanity when you drafted a press release 3 days earlier. We didn't move into the estate. We bought a fixer-upper across the city. Good bones. Needs work. Just like us. I'm sitting at our kitchen table repairing a bowl I broke last week using kintsugi. You don't hide the cracks, you fill them with gold. The belief is that the break is where strength lives. I once thought a perfect marriage meant smooth surfaces. No conflict, easy days. Eleanor taught me otherwise. She tried to shatter us. Instead, we fused. The trauma didn't scar us. It sealed us with gold. The bowl catches the afternoon sun, brighter than it ever was before. It's imperfect, jagged, unbreakable. If you believe toxic relatives don't deserve a seat at your table, hit like and share this story. And tell me in the comments, what's the pettiest thing a relative has ever done at a wedding?